That's why we're talking about we want these longer timelines because when you break down all the different roles or strategic decisions or who's sitting on a board, or ultimately how it's all structured, we want to buy ourselves time to really break down all these pieces and take care of who's coming up.
Hello and welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Excited to have Andrea Carpenter on the show. Andrea, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm excellent.
Awesome.
Andrea, a little bit about her. She is the president of Transition Strategists, where she helps business owners and successors plan for leadership changes, ownership handoffs, everything in between. And her work is focused on a part of wealth creation that many people avoid, which is succession. So she's been through it herself as a G2 and her family. Is she in a raising successor turned co-owner in a privately held business? Andrea knows what it's like to step into the founder's shoes and what happens when a transition is handled with care versus when it's not handled with care. So, Andrea, why don't you give our listeners a bit more about your background and then we'll dive in.
Awesome. So glad to be here. And I think what's important to know about my work and business transitions in general is how happy or how good you feel or how successful it is at the end boils down to like our mental mindset and the human connection and how we
Mm,
feel and perceive that. We talk to business owners so much about, oh, they don't feel happy that they sold, or something feels
mm,
missing at the end. And a lot of that is mental preparation. And so for me and my family, I watched my dad build and sell a business that was potentially part of the story. It also happened, his business officially sold for the last time right at the end of COVID. And so he's sitting there and it's a little bit of this like, well, what exactly is next moment? And so I saw my dad do that. And suddenly there was this like influx of wealth in our family and what that meant for us. And I just got this like strong passion for how do we help people talk about wealth and being good stewards and being a rising gen coming up, and found this kind of lane. A lot of who we help are families, or businesses who treat partners and employees like family. So people who want to take care of people as part of the transition. There's obviously a wealth and monetary component of any exit, which is super important, but there's also just taking care of people because that's a lot of why we do what we do. So you mentioned in my bio, I've recently started purchasing into the transition strategist business. It's a little bit meta in the fact that I am the successor now, the person coming up into leadership. So I am her succession plan. We're living through this. And so I'm kind of on the flip side of the table too, into coming up into a business that someone else built, and I get to be the future steward of taking this forward and helping more families do that. So that's a little bit about me and kind of our practice and who we help.
love it. Love it. So that practice, the business, talk about just kind of what you looked at when I guess taking over and why you thought it was a good fit. What do people need to look at when they're looking at was it an acquisition or was it what was the transition? Did you acquire the business?
I am in the process of acquiring it.
Okay.
We decided to go the route of partnership, which for a lot of reasons, I could say for the majority of people, that might not be what I would suggest for them. I'm at an interesting season of my life of growing a family and having kids and wanting to have a partner and wanting to get into a space where a really strong depth of knowledge and experience, is crucial to the work and the success of it. And so, that is how I kind of found myself partnering up with Elizabeth, who's been helping businesses figure out their transition plans and their roadmaps for the last 30 years. And so ours is it's a slow, she wants to retire in 5 to 7 years. She
Mm,
started creating her transition roadmap about 3 to 5 years ago. I met her 2 years ago. So she made her roadmap and said, hey, it would be really cool if I found a successor or someone who could be a steward of this for the future at some point. And she met me about a year later. And so I think there's something in preparation. And when you know the direction you want to go, you're
Yep.
able to see opportunities more clearly. That was not something I was expecting. We're sitting down in our first meeting. And like 15 minutes into meeting her, she goes, you could be my successor. And I was like, what? What does that mean? I'm going to build my own business. I'm going to do this own thing. And so to come in, really, in my mind, buying a business that's doing under 5 million in revenue, you're buying yourself a job. And so that was a decision that I very consciously had to make around like, do I want to buy myself a job or build something? But just based on my skills, we have an assessment that we do called the IMAP, which is what's your intrinsic wiring and the things that you love to do. I'm a big refiner. And so she really helped position why coming into her business and buying that and being her successor would really fit my skill sets. And we're having so much fun. It's been a lot of fun kind of growing and figuring out how to scale this. And also I'm challenging her when if you're an owner and you're inviting someone to come up and be a leader and eventually take over that business, suddenly it's not your vision anymore. You're sharing that vision with someone else. And so there's a
Yep.
lot of like personal transformations that each of us are going through, me as I grow into a leader in the business and her as the vision kind of becomes both of ours and she becomes more of a guide.
There's a lot of people that, I mean, I think there's a huge opportunity right now and probably for the next decade, maybe even longer, for people to acquire businesses. Um, I want to take me through kind of what you looked at. You already mentioned a few things, but what you really looked at and why you thought this was a good fit for you versus starting your own business, which that was your original plan. It sounds like is, hey,
Mhm.
why would I do this? Why would I not just start my business? So why was this acquisition that you're kind of going through right now the better path? And I guess what attracted you to it?
Mhm. I watched my dad build a business completely on his own. He never took any outside money. And so at the end, there's obviously something really nice about being the majority owner. He ended up bringing in a partner, but like owning that 100% completely, there's definitely something there. But the grind is really hard, especially when you haven't figured out product market fit and a lot of these other things. So I'm looking at a business. I now realize that one of my skills is refiner, and I'm looking at all this IP. I'm looking at the way that we serve clients, and I see a huge opportunity to help more family businesses and privately held businesses transition well. And there's certainly for me, there's a big like purpose piece of this, which is if I can help more successors and rising gens in their families or help the families not fall apart or help the businesses survive. I think that helps the community. I think that helps our world. And so I love the mission of what we were doing. That was a huge factor in thinking about coming in. But when you ask, like, why wouldn't you just go build your own thing? I think this kind of speeds up the process for me to really get there. I have a good base. There's already a team in place. I can really come in and do things in my superpower. I definitely bought myself a job. It's not a huge acquisition, but I'm purchasing 40% of the business at like 2 years ago value. And I
Mm.
get to buy that over the next few years. And so the financing worked really well. There's good
Yeah.
incentive for me to grow and for her to grow and for us to do that together. And quite honestly, I think we can do more together as the two of us using this as a foundation than I could do alone. And also, I'm in a season of I had my first baby about a year ago. My husband and I
Congrats.
are thinking about, yeah, what the future of our family looks like. And so, not being alone and like being the only person and having a partner and a team already in place that I could rely on in that season was just, it felt really good for where we were at.
That's really cool. Yeah, it sounds like a potentially an excellent opportunity that you took advantage of there. Um, how there's a lot of people that listen to this show that own businesses, and they're all in different stages. Some of them are starting, some of them are a few years in, or maybe even decades in, and some of them are to that point where they're going, I'm going to sell I, I, I haven't really thought about it, but I'm going to sell eventually. Maybe just starting to think about that. But one of my firm beliefs is you should always be thinking about the exit. Not that you have to, if you're just starting, maybe it looks different. It certainly is going to look different than when
Mhm.
you're about to exit. But um, I always think it's important to really think about it. What are some of the kind of questions or things that people really need to think about, really need to answer as they're looking at that?
Yeah. So when you say exit, what people think of is like, and then someday I exit and it is over. So
Yeah, sit on the beach.
yes, we always try to reframe this into it's a journey, not an
Yeah.
event. Sometimes you think it's going to take 2 or 3 years and things change. A lot of what we do is internal succession. So parents passing to their kids, or
Mm.
in mine, Elizabeth's case, she's passing to a successor or a set of maybe you have a leadership team or managers or senior leaders in your company, and you want to give them an opportunity to have ownership in something and grow it too. There's so many cool ways and opportunities to kind of structure the eventual, like what happens. And so we always say a journey, not an event, because it's multiple things that happen. We're
Love
always
that.
starting with like, what is the outcome that you want? That is always where we're starting. You go to a business broker or an M&A firm and you say, what do I want? What could I get? Like, those are really good things. And we partner often with brokers because you need to get a valuation. You need to know how much the business is worth. You need to know if it's worth enough money to sustain your lifestyle. Those are all things you need to start with. But people start with the money component and we say, let's start with what is actually important to you. What's important to you personally, to you, and if you have a partner or a spouse, your family, extended family. And then you think about the business units. Do you have a partner inside the business? What do you want to happen for them? What do you want to happen for your employees? What do you want to happen for like your work or your clients or your community? Because there's this ripple effect when someone is stepping out of a business or the business is changing, and it's an opportunity to kind of sustain or keep all of those things going. So we want to look at all of those things early on because when you start to evaluate options, like maybe selling is right, but maybe an internal transfer is right. If you're talking about kids, are you gifting to your kids? Are your kids buying in? That's a discussion we have a lot. Like gifting is really great tax strategy, but selling to your kids gives them buy-in. They now have ownership of it. How do you make it fair if some are in or out? And so the more you get into this, the more complexities you see around all the pieces and components of the business. And we want to zoom out, look at what's important so that when we get to that point, there's 4 or 5 questions actually that we'll look at before we ever get to, okay, so how do we structure it? Should I sell? Or what are those options? We're looking at some of these other pieces first, which I'm happy to talk more about if it's interesting to you. So,
Yeah, I mean, all very interesting. One question that just popped in my head as you're talking about the kids portion and maybe gifting to the kids, but in other times there's the owner that says, I I'm ready to retire, but I can't just gift this. Like I need the money. I've built a lot of value here. The business is worth a lot,
mhm.
but they want their kids to take over. How do you help navigate through that where, hey, I want the kids to take over. The kids do want to take over. Maybe it's one, maybe it's two, maybe it's whatever, but they want
Mhm.
to take over, yet there's some value here. And in order for me to step away, I need to realize some of that value.
Hmm. Yeah, so it really it starts with that why. Like why are you doing this? What are you going to do after? Because also if you have been in this business for forever and you don't know what you're going to do and you're bringing kids in and you don't get out of the way,
Yeah.
they are going to be so
Ooh.
annoyed with you and that's hard. And how do they grow and how do they be a leader? And
Yeah.
people are still looking to you and they need to have authority. So that's certainly
And they're
a
just the
too.
kid to all the employees.
Sometimes, yeah. And
Yeah.
and so there's certainly factors of that. The second thing we really look at is what are the assets? Because sometimes real estate's an interesting one because each building is technically a separate asset, but sometimes
Yep.
even within a business, maybe you own the building or you own the land, and then there's also the operating business. Are those two separate assets? Does the business require the land or the building that it's currently in, or is it actually a separate asset? Do you have to transition the asset of the building, or are we just transitioning the asset of the operating company? So we want to look at what exactly are all the assets that you have personally and as a company. Sometimes there's multiple companies or LLCs or different things that we're looking at. We want to look at them each individually as separate entities because that can help in your question of like, how do you like start to break down who's getting what and how it's going to be fair and how I can have cash flow or how I couldn't. Like if the land, like maybe you're in one unit, like the office is in one unit of the land, but you keep sort of an asset of a building and there's some cash flow coming out from that and that's part of your retirement cash flow, but the operating business goes to someone else. So what are the things? We also want to look at what we the many wins. We call the many wins because there's the transfer of your role, there's also the transfer of strategic decisions, and then there's the transfer of equity. So in an internal transition, we can look at those three things separately. Like right now, I kind of do like all of our finance things, and I also do all of our business development. Like those are the two things that I really do inside this business. Okay, the first thing I'm going to start to transfer to my kid or my successor who's coming in is actually going to be that business development piece because that'll start to get them ready to be more of a leader, and I want to do that like 2 years before I'm actually ready to actually step out of that business development role. And so that's why we're talking about we want these longer timelines because when you break down all the different roles or strategic decisions or who's sitting on a board, or ultimately how it's all structured, we want to buy ourselves time to really break down all these pieces and take care of who's coming up. The last big question I think that ties into what you just asked is who do I want to take care of? And
Mm.
so that could be monetarily, it could not be. It gets tricky when you have some kids in the business and some kids not. Do
Yeah.
you view it as a family asset? Like, is the business a family asset,
Mm.
or is the business an asset for people who work in the business?
Mm.
And how is that going to benefit? Because if you have
Yeah.
a daughter working in a business and a son who's not, and you say to the daughter, like, I'm going to sell it to you, this is the purchase price, and you're going to get a part of the proceeds, and your brother's going to get a part of the proceeds, and we're going to keep part of the proceeds for the family. Like, I've been working in this business for 5 years. Like, why does my brother get the same percentage of that sale?
Mm.
And also, I'm buying in, or I'm getting gifted, or I'm working
Yeah.
in exchange for time. So there's
Yeah, that
there's
can be tough.
feelings associated, yeah, with how you navigate equality and fairness and thinking about who you're going to take care of and how you look at the asset and also what you need to get out of it. So then it's really a question of how much money do I need? So there's a lot of wealth sort of look work here. Like how much money do you need annually to live? Is the business worth that much if you sold it all at once, like went to a broker or an M&A firm or got acquired and you sell that all at once, like then you have a pile of money versus doing an internal transition. There you might be carrying a note. They might be paying
Yep.
you over time.
Yep.
Maybe you're remaining a certain percentage owner,
Yep.
more like
Yep.
a silent partner, and you're sitting more in like board or governance roles. And so that's really where that financial piece. And after all those questions are answered, that's when we say, okay, yeah, I really think selling is the only option here. Or we should grow a little bit more first. Or I want to look at a strategy of gifting to kids or having the kids buy. That's really when we'll look at what are those options. So it's a really good process for is selling
Mm.
even right for me? I don't know based on my business or what paths are even open or available for me, really knowing the direction that you want to go, what's important to you, who you're going to take care of, and exactly what your assets are, then you can make some smart decisions around, yes, let's explore selling or let's explore succession. And you can walk in with a lot more confidence. So our favorite owners come to us 5 to 10 years before they want to do that, because that gives them a lot of runway to make sure that they can pivot and change and make decisions along the way.
And there's a lot to think about. Like as you're just mentioning that stuff, I'm like, oh my gosh, like those are big decisions. Now, maybe it's not as big a decision if you've got no family that wants to take it, and you know the only option is just to sell. maybe it's not as big of a decision, but holy cow, especially if you've got family or if you've got somebody in the company that's already working for the company that is, would be a, potential successor. Those are really big decisions to make, especially if you've got multiple of those types of people. That's where I can see it getting really messy, and having some help navigating that would be really crucial. How do you navigate that timing? You've talked about timing and, you know, having this successor come into the business, and you're kind of giving them stuff and stepping away. How do you kind of navigate that? Because I can see um, the it being maybe beneficial to just completely step away right away, and I can see it being very beneficial to not stepping away right away
Hmm.
and kind of being quote unquote the mentor of the
Hmm.
person. How
Yeah.
do you navigate that timing and determine maybe what's appropriate for that?
Really depends on the people and the business and probably the transaction price and how well you're able to communicate with each other. Like most of the issues and things that we deal with as we help owners through implementation is figuring out how to communicate everyone's expectations and what they're feeling and where they're growing and where they're challenged so that they can
Yeah.
talk about those things. I talked about that kind of that question of why and the initial clarity, like what do I want? What's important to me? That's actually a free tool, and I'm happy to give your listeners a link to download that.
Oh,
But
that'd be great.
that tool for the why, we're not doing it with just the owners. If you're thinking about bringing kids in or inviting partners in, we want to know what's important to them too.
Hmm.
Because one of the things that I originally wrote when Elizabeth and I did ours was I wrote, I want to be majority owner. Like I was wondering if she was going to be willing to sell me at least 51% right out of the gate. And I didn't put it as a deal breaker, but I said that that was important to me. And on hers, she put, I want to remain majority owner until
Mm.
I retire. And that was a deal breaker for her. And because that was out in the open, we're able to talk about those things and what's important to each of us. So this ties into the timing because um, a successor might have their own idea around like how soon they need to step up into leadership or their timelines,
Yeah.
and what they're imagining or their family or their situation or all those types of factors. So we want to look at what's important to the owner, but also what's important to the successor. Those two things together then help build the timeline of, okay, are we, Elizabeth and I are doing a much slower transition. I talked to an owner last week. He goes, no, I just like, I want to transact the whole thing at once so that everyone knows, like, now she's the authority.
Yeah.
She's the person in charge, and I'm just here around to help, but it's her thing. And that is going to work for them. And our situation is working really well for us. So it boils down to who are the people, what's important to them, will the business support whatever kind of structure that you're talking about? So that's one way that we'll start to figure out. There's really not like one process, especially when you're talking internal succession to someone else. It is so unique. The roadmaps that every family or private business walks away with is so different. That's what I love so much about our process. These, we call them the transition compass and then your transition roadmap. We've done it with people in all different industries, size of business, numbers of successors. They all go through the same process and end up with very different, very unique to them outcomes and roadmaps for what that's going to look like. And we're building these comprehensive timelines. And so it's really cool and it's super unique for each business in terms of timing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always an interesting one. And yeah, it's got to be determined by both the seller, I'll call them, the current business owner, and the whoever's taking over, right? It's got to be that conversation of what works appropriately for both parties. Um,
Hmm.
I'm watching it right now, and with a business, and the owner's husband and wife have been over the last 5 years kind of just stepping away, and you've been watching it, where they had all the responsibility to now they've got very little. They have still plenty of responsibility, but compared to before, they're just continuing to step and step and step and step away. And in
Hmm.
2 years, they'll be completely out of the business. And so, yeah, over the last 3 years, it's been kind of interesting and a little bit fun to watch how that plan is taking place.
Hmm.
And like one of the owners, he told me what was happening probably about 3 years ago. So I've been able to watch this journey
Yeah.
happen the whole time. So it's kind of cool. Um, how much involvement did you have in your dad's business growing up?
The normal thing that you do in like fifth grade where you go like label machine or stuff letters and stuff like
Yeah.
that. My dad's business was super technical. It was a tech company. And so
Mm,
in terms of like getting in and really like getting hands dirty on the actual work, that wasn't something too much, but the spirit of entrepreneurship was definitely alive at home. My parents encouraged me very young. I had an interest in graphic design. And so I started my first graphic design company when I was in high school. And my parents sort of helped me put together the business plan and figure out how to fund, like, okay, what equipment do you need? Well, I need this software and I
yeah.
need this type of thing. And so the spirit of entrepreneurship was certainly alive. I think when I went into college to get a graphic design degree, my dad was like, okay, she's not coming in the business. And my two other sisters were so much younger. That's how my dad made a decision to start thinking about transacting kind of at that time. We've talked about it a little bit. I don't know how much of the like idea of a family business or kind of doing something like that was exciting to him. But I know for some families, that's certainly something. But now he's kind of had this wealth event, and we get to have our I'll call it a very small family office, our family limited partnership, and we
Mm,
help with investments and we talk about like how is a family. So in that regard, I feel like we very much still have a family business, and a lot of this is the same. It's because what's everyone's philosophy or where do you have learning gaps? What are those types of things? Like when you start to get into family governance and how do we show up as a family and all of that. For some of the transitions that we do, Gen 2 to Gen 3 or Gen 3 to Gen 4, it's much more at that point about governance. When we're right now, we're going from five brothers to their like 23 kids in the next generation.
oh,
Those are,
yeah.
it's not 23 owners
Yeah.
at that point, right? And they have this big real estate company, right? Like the parents built I guess it's their great grandparents built all of this. And now these 23 kids and each family gets to vote some people to the board. And
Mm,
they come together and do stuff like that. And so there's really creative ways, depending on what the outcome is, what the goals are around how the family comes together and what that looks like. Sometimes it's even just the kids don't need to step into the business, but maybe they want to be on the board of the business so that they can get some kind of passive income and get experience to that. Some owners we talk to, they're like, yeah, my kids have no interest in the business. And I'm like, maybe that's true, but what if the business could support a board and kids coming in on more of a governance, like strategic decision making
yeah.
level? Would that be something that the business or the family could support? And that's something that they've just never thought of before. And so it boils down to what they want, right? They want the family to stay together. They want to have an asset that's producing money for the family so that the family can invest in other things or whatever those things look like. And so it starts with what's really important to you, where you're trying to go, because then the outcome can get designed. I hear this from you hear this from estate planners and tax attorneys and all these other things. Like, what's the strategy? What are you trying to get? Because then we can figure out how to design the system to support it.
Mm, yeah. So fascinating. Um, uh, I've got two kids, a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I always try to like think of how can I find ways for them to be involved in the business, see it, raising them as in an entrepreneurial spirit. And I
Mhm.
think I've done an okay job, but it's sometimes it's challenging. My head is down, right, and I'm just going. And sometimes it's challenging to kind of bring them in and talk, but it is fun to hear my kids now at 12 and 16 and talking about their future and the
Mhm.
businesses they're going to own. And yeah, neither of them have said they're going to take over my business, but
It's not
they,
something that a lot of people think about young. And then
yeah,
when like when you that like entitlement, a lot of people look at next gens or kids of entrepreneurs as, oh, they were just handed that or
Yeah.
whatever. Like that is something as a next gen that I take extremely personally, that most people just think that next gens feel entitled or that they earned this.
Mm,
Like more often than not, the next gens I talk to have shame. Their relationship with money is kind of rocky because they inherited this, they didn't earn it. It took me a long time to decouple myself from like whatever business I grow or do needs to be as good or better than my dad's. And
mm,
I need to do it on my own. I don't need to use any of the family resources. Like that would be cheating if I
mm,
did that. There's so much mindset even that I was struggling with around that. And so I think it boils down to it's great to invite your kids in if you can and give them exposure to that. But more what my parents taught me was working really hard,
yeah.
what investing was and about like holding things for the long term and compounding interest. And I learned ideas like that soon. And how do you set a goal and how do you get to that goal? And resilience and bouncing back when something is hard and doesn't completely go your way, those are the skill sets that eventually, if there is a family business and there's some type of invitation in, there's something about the age like 28 or 30 that
Mm,
I don't know if that's because that's kind of the age I am now, but I'm seeing people around my age, you've like done your own thing, you had your W-2 or your career or whatever that was, and you start to pivot back towards other things. There's tons of other people my age that I'm seeing, they're talking about their family businesses and, oh, I'm coming back to the business or I'm getting
yeah.
re-engaged or I'm finally talking with my dad about this thing. And so I know if your kids are 12 and 16, that feels like forever far away. And so you have to decide what's important to you and how long you want to operate it or whatever those things are, right? But I think the invitation's always there and the skills that you can teach them about being resilient, and
Yeah.
using money as a resource and not feeling ashamed of money and how money can help them do something faster or better or whatever that looks like. And like when I was talking with my dad about starting a business, he goes, we do have like a family investing office that could potentially invest in something that you want to start. And I was like, oh, I probably should have thought of that, but I didn't. Um, and I'm super involved in this world, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that as an opportunity. So as a parent to share what those opportunities are
Mm,
inside your family and to leave that door open. So once they explore their own thing and start to wander back, that they know the invitation is there to engage.
yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Uh, I mean, that 28 to 30 is, first of all, I think most people that are just graduating high school and even just graduating college are pretty immature still. And I know at least I was. I'll speak to myself. I was way too immature, especially graduating high school, to even think about running a business successfully. It would have been a joke for me.
Mhm.
And it, so yeah, I think a lot of people need to go out and explore, need to go out and do their own thing. If they come back, if they're interested in the business.
Yeah, what did I see my dad do? He encouraged me. Well, there's that German quote, you're the sum of the five people that you spend like
Yeah.
the time with. It was COVID, and he's like, "Hey, there's this thing called GoBundance Women. Maybe you want to look at it." It was the first kind of like introduction for me. He goes, "Maybe you'll meet some other entrepreneurs or other people." And so he just encouraged me, and
Mm,
and that's kind of when my parents are making investments in us as kids. We don't get to ask for money for fun things. We get to ask for money that's improving ourselves. I just
I
know that
really like that.
that is my parents' philosophy. I
Mm,
would never go ask my dad for money for a vacation, but I would ask my dad, hey, I found this really cool group called GoBundance. I think I want to commit to it. Are you willing to help kind of offset that for the first year so I can try it out? And that's what my parents invested in. And I think
mm,
that got me in rooms with really cool people. It exposed me to really cool things and new ideas. And I was a pretty mature person. I just but like it right my ability to accelerate and think and look at the future and big picture and set goals and kind of get in that mindset a little bit earlier was certainly accelerated by the groups that I was able to join. And that was my dad influencing my environment, right? Without him being the person to influence it. He just put me in circles with people
mm.
that he thought would help my mindset. That was really big for me.
Yeah, that's really powerful. If you have the ability to do that, I love that idea. Look, don't come to me to ask for a new boat or whatever, all these
Mhm.
other, but if you want to develop yourself and grow yourself and get around the right people, yeah, let's talk. Right.
Mhm.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Talk about a mistake that either you've made or you've seen people make that you want to talk about, and how can our listeners learn from it?
Mm. The thinking that the other person is on the same page
Hmm.
as you.
That applies in all kinds of
All
business
kinds of
applications,
situations.
right? I mean, oh
Yep.
my gosh.
Yep. In the context of coming in and buying this business and deciding if I wanted to be her partner, there's conversations we had, right, about what we both wanted, and just to make an assumption that nothing has changed and to not check in to make sure that it still feels good.
Mm,
Are we still aligned? Are we
yeah.
still moving forward? Like we have very good candor, but I think sometimes, especially if you're like if it's a like a parent child relationship, people make assumptions on that person's ready for this role, or that person's not mature enough for this role, or this person wants this because they said that 3 years ago in passing in conversation. Um, a lot of times for successors, the parents are like, yeah, it'll be so great when you take over the business in like
Mm,
5 years. And they say that, and the kid or the successor who's coming up takes that as like, oh, 5 years. And it hits 4 years, it hits 4.5 years. We're not talking about it. I'm afraid to bring it up because I don't want you to think that I'm entitled. And
yeah.
you don't even remember that you said that. You're not ready. Like you haven't started thinking
Mhm.
about what's next for you and what the transition could look like. I perceive that as something that's going to happen really fast. And you do not perceive that as something that's going to happen really fast. And so there's missed expectations. So yeah, lack of communication on what we're thinking and checking in on how things are going. Certainly in our work is a huge piece, and I've run into that on my own several times.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's applicable to business, well, shoot, to life, to your personal
Oh,
relationships as well. I mean, it just
yeah.
not aligning your expectations
Hmm.
that doesn't work
Yeah.
well. Andrea, what I got a couple last questions then before we wrap up. What's a favorite book you can recommend to our listeners?
The Art of Gathering by
Hmm,
Priya Parker. It's really about the ways that we come together intentionally to celebrate, grieve, and really designing a gathering intentionally around the outcome that we're hoping for.
that's a new one. I have not heard of that one.
I had
Love
to come up with something that I thought maybe your listeners hadn't heard of.
I really like that because a lot of times we get some similar books. Although I feel like people are more and more trying to find books that not everybody has said, 30 times type of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, I have to say one more. Myth of the Silver Spoon, by Kristin Keffeler. That one is about rising gens. And it's a really great book for rising gens who are inheriting wealth, but also for parents who are navigating like feeling like their kids are entitled, or what
mm,
does it look like, or how does the world perceive them. I love her body of work around. She did tons of research on next gens and the problems that they face. And spoiler alert, we're the same as everyone else, but there's a few extra special things that next gens deal with. And that book is super helpful in just learning more about your kids who might be wealth inheritors, or if you're a wealth inheritor, what that experience is like.
yeah, that's a great book right now for probably a lot of listeners, because there is a huge generational handoff coming. Um, I know my parents aren't going to be handing off big generational inheritance, but many parents are, and that is coming for people. And a lot of people are going to be the baby boomer generation are going to be selling their businesses, are going to be retiring, are going to potentially be passing over the next couple decades. That's going to really happen. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's no, it's not hidden, right? There's this huge wealth transfer that is start just getting started. So,
Yes.
Andrea, what are your three pillars of wealth creation?
It's a good question. I Some of them I'm thinking in a monetary sense, and some of them maybe not so much. So let's give this a shot. I think the first one is spending intentionally. because if you don't spend money, you keep more of it and then you have more of it. I feel like that was definitely a value in our family growing up. I remember getting to high school and I was like, I need to apply for FAFSA. And my dad, like, I remember him laughing at me and he was like, no, you don't. You don't need to do that. And so I think that was just, I'm really happy to have brought that into my life going forward is just to spend intentionally, but also to spend on things that are going to help you grow
Right.
as a person and grow your business and that are fun and help your relationships and all those other things that are important to you, but not spending on things that are frivolous or not moving that forward. So that's one. The second one, kind of a big investment strategy in our family is that compounding interest long-term hold. I think I look at that money my dad put in accounts for us when we were really young, and I hope to never have to touch that and pass that directly to my kids. But what an amazing gift that my parents gave me, that continues to grow that I don't
Yeah.
even have to touch.
Yeah.
So that's certainly one. And then just being a good steward, I think, is the third one for me as a next gen, thinking about our family wealth, thinking about what wealth can do. I think having a vision of kind of the future or what you're going to do with it and what wealth is going to make possible for you and your community and your family and how you can be a good steward of it puts you in more of that abundance mindset, at which point you're more of an attractor to wealth and things that can get you there. And so for me, wealth, obviously, there's a money component, but there's a huge mindset of having wealth as well. And I think stewardship plays into that a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Love it. Andrea, look, this has been awesome. Anything else that we missed? Any last, little pieces of advice you want to give to our listeners?
Yeah, if the transition work is interesting to you and you're thinking about what's next, like I said, that clarity piece is the number one place where we will start with all our clients. I love giving away that tool for free. So I put together a little link for the listeners,
Yeah.
transitionstrategist.com / POWC for Pillars of Wealth Creation. And I'm sure
Awesome.
Todd will put that in the show notes for you. But
Yes.
I invite you to there's a little video in there of me talking through like what does it look like to even begin to think about getting clarity and how would you invite your family and your kids in or your partners or even just sit with yourself and think about what's next. That's a really good place to start in thinking about transition that doesn't get you so caught up in the numbers. So that would kind of be what I would like to leave people with
Cool.
is yeah, just finding what's important to you so that you can really design that next adventure and take care of everyone that's important to you.
That's awesome. Andrea, how else can our listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I'm Andrea Carpenter. And if you're a next gen, I post a lot of things for next gens on Instagram at your next gen friend.
Cool. Great. Again, Andrea, really appreciate you being on the show, and you have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. Say, I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. Your rating and review just helps us push this out to more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So the other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to venturedproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out. And we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day. I'll catch you on the next episode.